Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to Go AZ Motorcycles in Scottsdale YouTube channel. My name is Jason Paredes. I'm the parts department manager here at Go AZ Motorcycles in Scottsdale, and I just wanted to spend a few minutes and talk to you about setting your suspension up on your off-road machine with the suspension. We're going to talk a little bit about the intricacies. We're not going to get into great depth, but I'm going to talk about a little bit of the things that us with either great knowledge or very limited knowledge can do to make sure that our chassis is set up appropriately for ourselves, and how to not be so intimidated. A lot of people feel like suspension is this magic art that is impossible to learn, and I want to see if I can bring it down to the average consumer's level so that we can be more comfortable and get our chassis set up outside of the baseline numbers that they come with from the factory so that it's right for you. Again, we're going to go over that briefly. We'll touch on some major points and then maybe breeze by some more intricate things, and maybe I'll offer some suggestions at the end of the video. Again, thanks for tuning in, and here we're going to get into it. All right, guys, the first thing that's going to be really important for us to have when we're out and we're getting ready to go for a ride is a good motorcycle stand. Our triangles or our side stands that come with the bikes do a great job of having this bike propped up so that we can hit the trail, but it's not going to offer us the utility that a stand will. So here's a Matrix concept stand. This is one that we keep in stock. It's really nice, aluminum, lightweight, inexpensive, all the great things that you can want from a stand, especially for getting ready to set up chassis. So step one, if we've got a stand, is to get the bike up on the stand. We're going to do that really simply. And there we are. Bike's up off the ground, both wheels. This is going to be really important for getting our chassis set up and ready for the trail. Now, first things first, the most important part of any suspension and chassis setup is tire pressure. It seems so logical, it seems so easy, but most overlooked part of anybody's chassis setup. So first things first is we're going to go and check our tire pressure. Depending on the tire you have and the terrain you're running, be sure to make note of where you're running at. And we look good. A normal baseline to get started, depending on your tire and terrain, is going to be about 13 pounds on your front tire and 12.5 in the rear. You're welcome to adjust based on if you've got a Bridgestone, Dunlop, Michelin, or Pirelli. All of them, the carcass is going to act a little different. The knobs are going to react different. And some of you may be running an intermediate hard, intermediate soft, soft, or sand tire. Those are all going to react differently and going to want different tire pressures. But again, first things first, we always want to check our tire pressure. This is the number one most important part of anybody's chassis setup. All right, guys, the next thing that is very often overlooked but really very important is the pressure in our forks. And there's a little bit of confusion about what we need to do with this or why we ought to do this. But if you load up your bike and you're either above or below sea level and you're going increase or decrease in elevation, the air in our fork, in a conventional spring and oil fork, is going to change. And we want to make sure that the air pressure on the inside of the fork is equivalent to where we're riding. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop our screwdriver in there, and we're just going to let this guy open up. Be careful, if you've increased or decreased in elevation, this guy might get away from you. Motion Pro offers a really nice quick disconnect. There it is out, and we're just going to drop it back in. Nothing special to it. We just want to make sure that that's done so that the air pressure on the inside of our fork is equivalent to the ambient air pressure of wherever it is we're riding. That's going to make sure that all of our suspension, valving, springs, and fluid is going to be working the appropriate way based on where we're at in elevation and temperature. All right, guys, the next thing that we've got on the list is race sag. Race sag is so important. This is going to make sure that your chassis and the back end of your motorcycle, which is going to directly affect the front end of your motorcycle, is working the way that it's meant to for your speed, your weight, your height, for the spring that's on your shock, the valving that's in your shock, the spring that's in your fork, and the valving that's in your fork. If you've got an Austrian machine or a Swedish machine, there's going to be a preset mark here on the back end of your fender. If you haven't got one that's got a preset mark, the easiest thing to do is run your sag gauge. Here we keep our Motion Pro sag scale number 2. This is the new revised piece. Really nice, really easy to use. You're just gonna pop that there into your axle. You want it to be as straight up and down as possible. We're gonna drop a little mark so that we've got a baseline now. And then we're just gonna run this guy down to 0. And now we know where we're at in a neutral position with all of the weight off of the suspension. Another reason why our stand is really critical to making sure our machine's gonna be running great on and off the trail. Now that we've got that zeroed, we're just gonna pop the bike off really quickly. We're gonna check our static sag, and that ought to be around 25 to 35 millimeters. It's a little low right now, so that's a point where we would be making an adjustment. Once you have your 0 and you're checking where your static sag's at, you're also gonna find a friend or somebody that you park next to at the track and have them hold the front end of the motorcycle for you. You're gonna sit on it, give it a couple bounces to let the suspension settle in, and then you're gonna measure where your sag is at based on your weight with your gear on. Now, most Japanese manufacturers recommend that you start around the 105 millimeter mark for race sag. The Austrian, sometimes it's between 104 to 107. It's gonna be really depending on your riding style also. That's merely a baseline like everything else from suspension from the OEMs. So what I recommend is finding that sweet spot, 105 to 107, maybe 104 to 107 based on your speed, weight, height, suspension setup, chassis setup, where you're riding, who you're riding with. Mess around with it a little bit. Don't be afraid. Like I said, it's not magic, it's just suspension. All right, guys, and finally, something that we really ought to be doing, and this is where it starts to get a little fun, is have a notebook with you. A lot of us have smartphones. You got a notebook app on there also, or if you have a paper one like an old school guy, that's all right. We're gonna do our suspension clickers and adjustments. On our 2020 CRF 450R, we've got our compression adjustments up here, high speed and low speed. We've got our rebound adjustment down here at the bottom of a shock. And then we've got our compression adjustment up here at the top of our fork, and our rebound adjuster down here at the bottom of our fork. Your service or your owner's book is gonna offer you all of the recommended baseline settings. I always recommend starting there, get that feel for the bike in a neutral baseline setting position, take some notes, go out, burn a lap, burn a loop, figure it out, where is it comfortable and where is it not. Then don't be afraid, run those adjusters in, run them out. Compression is going to affect how quickly the fork or shock compresses. Your rebound is going to affect how quickly or slowly the shock or fork rebounds or reopens. There's a really great engineer someplace in either Sweden, Austria, or Japan who's building the suspension. The shim stack's good. The springs are usually pretty good from stock. Play with them. There's a baseline weight number in your owner's manual too. Figure out where you land. Maybe you need to go up or down a spring. Let's get these chassis set up. Let's get the suspension dialed in. Let's get you out there enjoying the ride. All right, guys, thanks again so much for tuning in to Go AZ Motorcycles Scottsdale YouTube channel. Again, I'm Jason, the parts department manager here at Go AZ Motorcycles in Scottsdale. The number here at the store is 480-609-1800. We've got great service and parts department staff here. We can help you get suspension set up. We can help you, give you some recommendations. Again, we went through really quickly. Tire pressure is important, fork pressure is important. Get your clicker set, get your race sag set. Let's make sure our springs are set up for our weight and speed. You guys, this is how we go out and enjoy our motorcycles, is by making them right. Don't be afraid, have some fun, and come down and ask us if you've got any questions. Thanks again so much for tuning in.